money's ability to buy joy is predicated on how we understand it, how we save, spend, and invest it, and that there are things that we can do to be more joyful.
Ever wonder why, despite your best efforts, your financial decisions still leave you feeling stressed and misaligned? Dr. Daniel Crosby, renowned psychologist and New York Times bestselling author, joins us today on the Mitlin Money Mindset to reveal why most money struggles aren't about math, they're about meaning. Imagine a world where your financial choices don't bring you anxiety, but deep fulfillment and joy. Daniel's groundbreaking work, including his latest book, The Soul of Wealth, offers a powerful roadmap to bridge the gap between money and meaning, helping you reclaim control, build lasting wealth, and live with purpose. Stay with us, because this conversation just might change the way you see your money and your life. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Mitlin Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Mitlin Financial. Let's dive into today's show. Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Daniel Crosby, Chief Behavioral Officer at Orion. It is so great to see you today, Dr. Crosby.
Larry, it's good to be back.
Yeah, thank you. You are one of not many, a very small, select group of people that we've invited back on. And, I love what you're doing. And I think behavioral finance is so important these days. And thankfully, the profession is recognizing it and we're moving in that direction. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But, in order to give our listeners a little background about you, because I think that, many times that gets lost when we're talking to people, and our listeners really are fascinated by kind of people's journeys. I think that's an important piece of knowing and understanding who people are. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey to up to the point of you becoming the Chief Behavioral Officer at Orion?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I am actually a clinical psychologist by education. I went to school to be a shrink. So, I entered thinking that I was going to be working in private practice. I specifically entered because of an interest in helping people with eating disorders. That was sort of the original thing that drew me to the field of psychology. Over time, I expanded that out to just sort of a general private practice. But Larry, I was just 23 when I started my PhD program and started seeing clients. And, I think we can both agree that 23-year-olds are perhaps not very well equipped to dispense life wisdom. And I very quickly sort of became overwhelmed and stressed out and was taking work home with me at that young age, being a therapist. And so by about the time I was finishing up my PhD program, I came to my father, who still is a financial advisor, and I said to him, like, "Hey, I love studying human behavior. I love thinking deeply about why people do the things that they do, but I don't know that I need to do it in a medical context. And do you have any ideas for me, sort of career wise?" And this is whatever 17 years ago or something. And
Mhm.
my dad did not know the words behavioral finance or behavioral economics, but he said, "Well, hey, one of my big jobs is as a counselor to my clients and someone who keeps them from making poor emotional decisions. Maybe there's something there." So that comment from my dad really put me on a path to begin to explore this world of the psychology of money and behavioral finance and just how people make decisions with their finances.
I think you were, probably 17 years ago, would you say you were early to this, kind of new area of the profession? Because I feel like I've been in the profession for longer than that as well. And I just don't feel like this was really spoken about early on in my career at all.
I think I was early to the application, sort of the practical application in wealth management. There were certainly people like Richard Thaler and Danny Kahneman doing this in the ivory tower. But, my dad is a financial advisor in Alabama. The insights of the ivory tower were not getting to people like my dad. And that's where I felt like I was a good intermediary and a good translator. I could translate, speaking the language of academics. I could take the insights of people much smarter than me distill them down and package them and share them with people like my dad.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you were going through your studies and obtaining the PhD, did you ever think in a million years this is the direction you were going to end up in?
No, I mean, no, definitely not. I mean, it's interesting because I began college with an eye to becoming an advisor like my dad, and then thought, no, I want to help people, which is funny to look back and think on because, I mean, financial advisors help people in enormous ways that reverberate through generations. But at the time, at a young age, I had a very sort of black and white stereotypical notion of what it looked like to help people. And it meant being a therapist. I've since learned that, one of the greatest helping professions on earth is financial advisor. And people are more worried about, people experience more stress about their finances than anything else. Advisors do a great job alleviating that. It's absolutely a helping profession.
Yeah, amazing stuff. So, one of the things you talk about, and I speak very often about with the families we serve is, money having a why and having some kind of, just why to your life, why before you start making decisions. And, I'd like you to share why do you think that money needs a why or should have a why attached to it?
So, in my new book, The Soul of Wealth, I have a chapter that's all about this. It's one of my favorites, and I think that this is absolutely one of my soapboxes. And the reason is just because it's so powerful. Just to share some of the insights from that chapter, in one study by Morningstar, people who named their accounts, right? So, call it Larry's Retire to Hawaii Fund instead of, Larry's Fund ABC 123. People who named their accounts had 15% more wealth than their unnamed peers. Another study found that people were 10 times less likely to go to cash in volatile markets when they had ascribed a Y to that portfolio. Because again, in a volatile market, it's a very different thing to give up your dream of retiring to Hawaii than it is to cash out some nameless, faceless fund. Another study, perhaps my favorite in that chapter, it looked at two groups of people. One control group, no intervention. The other was instructed to look at a picture of their children for 5 seconds, their family, for 5 seconds before making financial decisions. And the people who were reminded of their why by looking at this picture of their family or the kids, they saved more than twice as much as the control group because, again, it just re-centered them on that purpose. Um, Everything we are asked to do with money is difficult. We're wired for immediacy. We're wired to spend. We're wired for impatience. We're wired for certainty. And being a good investor requires you to take on uncertainty, to be patient, to be long term, to save. And the only way we can say no to all that stuff we want is to say yes to something bigger. And that's our why.
So I think if that's not evidence enough to go out and figure out your why, if
Mm.
you don't have it, I don't know what is at this point. We always talk about, and from a behavioral finance standpoint, controlling what you can control is something we often hear, especially in markets like we've seen in 2025 thus far. Right? It's hard to do that sometimes, but how do you suggest that people go ahead and apply that concept?
I think the most important thing that investors need to understand with respect to this idea is that you control what matters most. Larry, I don't know if you run into the same thing, but when people hear that I work in finance, I get a reliable set of questions. And a lot of times, especially in a market like we've had this year, it's something like, what's the president going to do? What's the Fed going to do? What are the tariffs going to do? What's the virus going to do? And, I don't know. Like nobody
Hmm.
knows. It's
Me neither.
yeah, right. Like it's out of our control. And then even if we knew what was going to happen, the market's response to that is likewise out of our control. The research paints a different picture. The research says that you control what matters most. Couple of books ago, my first solo book called The Laws of Wealth, the very first chapter is called You Control What Matters Most. And it's just about investors taking the power back, right? And saying things like, you maximizing the engine of your wealth, which is your skills and your education and your know-how. That's the best predictor of your ability to build wealth. Saving adequately, working with a professional, keeping reasonable fees, diversifying your assets. These things are all 100% within your control 100% of the time, and they are much more predictive of your long-term success than you guessing, what's going to happen with the next trade war.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting that you focused on that and said those things, because as I'm thinking about many times when we're meeting with families that are coming to us, a lot of times they've come from other advisors, right?
Mhm.
And we're in the same boat. We can't control the markets, but those factors that they can control, the family that is, a lot of times they have not controlled those. And that's why they're looking to leave. They've turned over that agency to the advisor. And unfortunately, in some instances, the advisor has dropped the ball. Whereas if we can show them an experience where we pick up that ball and we follow through on those things, that's where it's a super great match.
Mhm.
Many times it's not my advisor lost me money. It's other things like my advisor, I haven't heard from them during the volatility. I just need some reassurances. I need to refocus. I need that coaching, if you will.
Yeah.
One of the things that you talk about also is trouble is an opportunity, but it's often something that's very hard in practice also, like controlling what you can control. What tools can people use to kind of proactively use that trouble as an opportunity?
Yeah. So the great investor Howard Marks talks about the perversity of risk. And the perversity of risk is basically that the times when it's most attractive to invest, our perception is that it's the most dangerous. I mean, even if you look at, this year, we've had some big downswings and some big upswings. And those big downswings were, with 2020 hindsight, a great time to invest. They always have been, but they don't feel like it at the time. So everybody knows to buy low and sell high, but effectively no one does it. And so your question is a good one. What can we do about it? Well, there's two things. The first and the most powerful is to just use the power of automation. When we're talking about overcoming a behavioral tendency, um, a lot of times we think of this as like, oh, we've got to just grit our teeth past this or discipline our way or white knuckle our way past this. The more effective path in every instance is to roll with your natural behavioral tendencies instead of against them. And one of the things that we know about humankind is that we're kind of lazy, we're sort of status quo prone, and we're forgetful. So that's the reason I haven't canceled my HBO Max subscription from 2 years ago, that, that's just sort of running in the background and charging me every month. But it's also the same tendency that makes me, overpay for subscription services. If I automate saving every 2 weeks, escalating that saving over time, I also sort of forget about that and take that for granted. So if we can use these behavioral tendencies like forgetfulness and laziness and status quo proneness to our benefit, we can learn to see good times, bad times, and every time in between is a good time to invest and just lock that in. The second thing to do is really to kind of almost develop a sense of Schadenfreude about these things and keep a list of investments that you want to make that maybe seem a little too dear, a little too precious at the time. And so to see bad markets as buying opportunities for companies that you're long-term bullish on. So again, this shouldn't be like your primary strategy or a huge percentage of your wealth, but there are inevitably opportunities. And I think a lot of people have seen volatile down markets as opportunities to get great companies, great long term players on sale. So I think that when you develop this sense of Schadenfreude about it, you can almost get a little bit excited, a little bit sort of have a perverse excitement about, like, oh, things are on
Mhm.
sale.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is, don't just approach this as it's being thrown to us or thrown at us. Have a plan of attack, for the long haul to take advantage of these, more volatile times because we don't necessarily know when they're going to happen, but we know they are going to happen at some point. So have a plan for that and be prepared. And then you're acting less on those things that we go back to by default, and we're acting on a proactive, thought out kind of process.
Yeah, I
Is
love
that
I love your piece about planning there. We get a 10% dip in the market effectively every year on average.
right?
And yet, every time it happens, the news talks about it as though it's never happened before. Like, you need a plan for this. We get a 20 to 30% dip every couple of years. Like, it happens. We've had one about every 3 years. Like, if you're a 20, 30 year investor, you're going to get a lot of these. You're going to get 7 to 10 of these in your lifetime. You do need to have a plan for them. And when you have that plan, you needn't fear. You can approach it like the opportunity that it is.
Right. And you have to remember not to abandon the plan too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's the other thing. Do you know finances can be joyful with your partner? We created a fantastic guide for couples to start their journey surrounding their finances. Head over to Midland.us/couplesjoy to download your free copy today. Don't miss out. Start bringing more joy into your financial conversations. So, we are all about joy here. So, when we talk about money and we talk about tying it to our why, hopefully these are joyful events or joyful dreams and goals that we have. How can people find a reliable track to joy, with regard to their money, allowing them to go and stay on that track?
There's a great question here, and hopefully you can get T-shirts made that speak to the five pillars. If you There's actually a robust science of joy. It's the work of Martin Seligman. He's studied what gives human life joy, what leads to human flourishing, and I talk about it in the first chapter of The Soul of Wealth. But there's five things. I'll go through them quickly. The first of these is positive experiences. This is having fun. This is like fun and leisure, going to a football game, going to the beach, eating an ice cream cone. Money is awesome at that. Like, money can scratch that itch very nicely. We're good at that. The second one of these is engagement. This is deep, meaningful work, right? We don't often think about hard work as being part of what brings us joy, but we are growth oriented. We are work oriented. We need something to do, right? Work is,
Ask somebody who actually retired, right, and didn't have a plan. They can attest to that, right?
well, you make a great point, because in the book, I talk about how recent retirees are more depressed and
Right.
more even suicidal than the general population, because they lose some of these next four things, right? The third
Mhm.
one is relationships. This is the most impactful one. So, giving and receiving love, having people that you're close to is like the biggest predictor of a joyful life. The fourth is meaning. So, spirituality, religion, philanthropy, volunteerism, working for something bigger than yourself. And then the final one is advancement, growth, being better today than you were yesterday in whatever domain you're focused on. So, Larry, what's wild is, if you think about retirement, right? Retirement is great for that first one. Retirement is great to free you up to have fun. But if we're talking about work, relationships, working for something bigger than yourself, and personal growth, work is actually really good at all of those things.
Mhm.
And so we as a profession have to get better about helping people plan for joy. And I know that's what you and your firm are all about, but like, we have to get better as a profession about helping people not only prepare to buy a second home or a convertible or a be able to golf a lot, which is just that one of the five, but
Right.
also to find meaning, to find hard work, to find, opportunities for connection. So that's what joy looks like in a nutshell.
Great picture of how to take a look at that. Now, you talk about spending money as a form of voting,
Hmm.
right? Spending money as a form of voting. Can you share what you mean by that?
Yeah, so money is your vote for the world you want to live in. We voted last year, hopefully all voted last year for the kind of political system we wanted to live in. But every single day, every dollar that you spend is a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. And I don't think we commonly think of it that way. One of the ways that I drew on this idea was I looked at civil and human rights movements through the ages. I mean, if you look at bus boycotts in the deep south, if you look at sports and diamond divestment in apartheid South Africa, if you look at throwing tea in a harbor in Boston in the 1700s, like all of these are economic and financial levers that people are pulling to try and change the world. And in large and small ways every day, the money that we spend tells the world how it ought to be. And so, like, I take my kids to a farmer's market on the weekends, and one of the kids was like, "This spaghetti sauce is really expensive." And I said, "Yeah, like this is a lot more than Prego at Target where we normally shop. But, I want to live in a world where I can enjoy a spring morning walking around in a beautiful park and supporting my neighbors and their entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I'm going to continue to pay too much for tomato sauce because that's the world I want to live in." So I
Right.
think it's an empowering way to think about money to say, hey, what do I want the world to be like for me, for my kids, for my grandkids? And how can I use my money to bring that about?
Great points, and we all can control that to some degree. So I think that's a very valuable concept. Now, one of the things we've heard you even hear, we've even heard you say over the last few minutes that we've spoken is, how an advisor can be very helpful to a family. And I've heard you say that an advisor, almost becomes your decision guide who will protect you against your worst impulses. Can you share what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the research on working with a financial advisor shows a couple of things. First of all, this is, I think, under publicized. So let me take this opportunity. People who work with advisors experience a host of non financial benefits. They're more prepared for an emergency, they're happier, they have better marital communications. And it just like the list kind of goes on and on. And the reason is because money touches every part of our lives. And so when we get, with the help of an advisor, our financial lives under control, it tends to raise all boats. And I think that that is sort of an under discussed and underappreciated benefit of working with a financial advisor. From a financial perspective, when we look at a meta analysis, so JP Morgan did a meta analysis of this is like a study of all the studies on how advisors add value to their clients' lives. And one of the things that this study showed was that the thing that was most predictive of client success was what we would call behavioral coaching, which is effectively that advisor keeping that client from making a handful of large catastrophic decisions over their financial lifetime. So, preventing them from selling everything in March of 2020 when we thought the world was ending because of COVID, and then the market shoots up, things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of value that an advisor adds, but one of the biggest things can be, at big crossroads in your life, being able to go to that advisor and speak to them about a big decision you have on the horizon.
Now I want to take a shift to your book. You released in late 2024, The Soul of Wealth, which we've mentioned a few times. You've cited some great studies and references to it. It was The Soul of Wealth: 50 Reflections on Money and Meaning. And you know kudos to you. Like all your other books as well, you've gotten a lot of rave reviews over it. At the end of the day, what do you hope that readers take away from the book? Like, what's the end goal for you that you're hoping people take away from it?
Yeah, I think that's the right question to be asking, and thank you for the shout. The reason I wrote the book, Larry, when this country was founded, not quite 250 years ago, 85% of the world was living in poverty, which is shocking to think about. Like, so that's $2 or less a day, like extreme poverty, 85% of the world. So effectively, everybody in everywhere was poor. And if you look at most of human history, it's been that way. Today, that number is under 9%. So we've gone from a world where everyone was poor to now, thanks to the merits of capitalism, the just a thriving middle class globally, and millions and billions of people being lifted out of poverty. Over that same time, we have become sadder, more anxious, more disconnected than any cohort in human history. So we have this strange juxtaposition of unprecedented material wealth and, to your firm's message, not a lot of joy, right? Not a lot of joy to go along with this wealth. So the whole book is trying to answer the question, what gives? Like, why why is this disconnect there if things are going so well? If the average American home has tripled in size since the 40s, why is no one happy? And so my thesis is that, money's ability to buy joy is predicated on how we understand it, how we save, spend, and invest it, and that there are things that we can do to be more joyful. And so that's what I hope people will do, is start to bridge that gap between, material wealth and psychological, personal, spiritual wealth.
Yeah, I highly recommend that people go out, buy the book, and read it because I think it gives some great perspective. And in the book itself, you explore the age old debate of does money buy happiness, right?
Mhm.
Can you share what your research has revealed in that regard?
Yeah, the name of the chapter is Money Can Kinda Sorta Buy Happiness Sometimes, and that is reflective of the research. We know for sure that low levels of wealth make us miserable, right? Low levels of wealth are tough. There's negative happiness that comes along with being poor, because we need enough to have health insurance and a warm place to sleep and good food to eat and healthy, a good place to send our kids to school. But once those things are met, money continues to buy happiness, a little bit north of that. But at some point, it matters a great deal how we spend it. And so when you look at the research on how we can spend money to buy joy, to buy happiness, there's a few things that emerge. First, we got to buy our time back. Time is the one thing that is always increasing in value, because your lifespan is, the sand is always falling from the hourglass. And so buying back your time by getting out of work that you hate, taking a vacation, getting a beautiful experience with someone you love, all of that buys a lot of joy and is very valuable. Being generous is reliably more joy inducing than spending money on yourself. Having experiences is reliably more joy inducing than buying material things, because experiences tend to get better with time and things tend to get worse. Um, I like watches. I bought a watch last week. I've already banged it. Like, I've already, already got its first scratch, and I still love
Right.
my watch, and I like nice things, but my memories that I have get better with age, right? And then the last thing is investing in relationships. Perhaps my favorite study in this chapter looked at people who buy cars, and people who buy cars in general. Cars are super expensive and don't buy you a lot of happiness. Um, but people who buy cars to join a car club get an enormous boost in happiness. because now they have some hobbyists that they can compare notes with, and they have somewhere to go on Saturday, and they have people to vacation with, and they have an inbuilt friend group. So anytime we can buy relational ties, this is one of the best things we can do with our money.
I think you explore a lot of this in the final chapter where you talk about no one gets rich alone, right?
Hmm.
I believe that's the title of it. And as I was thinking about that, I thought there was such a lesson there, which you kind of just alluded to, because in our episode number 49, I had a former Disney executive by the name of Dan Cockrell, who shared that he had one regret when he was growing up, that he didn't lean into his father, Lee Cockrell, who was also a very highly regarded Disney exec. And, he didn't want to leverage dad's network, even though dad was willing to leverage it for him. And I see some similarities between him and differences between him and your situation, because when you kind of entered this crossroads in your career, you somewhat did the opposite of what he did, and he kind of white knuckled it, plowed through, and you chose to go to your dad and get some advice and guidance, and he really opened some doors for you, and maybe a different way of thinking as well. How can people like learn from that and understand how the roles of other people in our lives and along our journey can be so powerful in helping others around us?
Yeah. So one of the things I think my story is nicely illustrative of this. So, I told a bit about that at the outset. Now, my dad is uh, a financial advisor in a mid-sized town in Alabama. He doesn't own a cell phone. Like he's not a well-connected guy.
Right.
So my dad wasn't opening doors for me to like get to where I am today. However, I also would not be where I am today without my dad, because he's the one whose insight and whose commentary put me on the path of discovery. And look, many other times along that journey, he's been helpful in, helping me set pricing or set strategy or something for the things that I've decided to do. When people minimize the role of other people's help in their lives, they tend to be selfish, and they tend to not send the elevator back down once they've arrived. So what I'm encouraging folks to do in that chapter is to just say, hey, no one gets to where they are without some good luck, without some help. So hard work, personal excellence, and being deeply grateful and acknowledging that you're lucky and helping other people can and should coexist. And I think we're capable of holding both ideas at once. And so I'm just encouraging people to think about that and try and send the elevator back down.
Great points, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I want to change directions for a few minutes here. People who've been following you and following your commentary over the last several years are well aware that you've been on this health journey, and I'd love for you to share kind of your impetus for this health journey and how it's going.
Oh yeah. So yeah, thank you for asking. So I've lost 65 pounds in the last year. And the the story of the impetus is rather funny. I have worked out 7 days a week religiously for a decade. Um, and yet I was overweight. And one of my gym buddies was earlier, I guess it was about a year and a half ago now, getting divorced. And he said, "Look, I gotta start dating again. I gotta get in shape. Like, what is like I haven't dated in 30 years. Like, I gotta get back out there." And so he went to to a nutritionist, and got this whole workout program and this eating program. And he brought this back, and he said, "Hey, would you do this with me? Like, would you be sort of my accountability partner on this thing?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And I mean, I already knew this research, but in retrospect, having now lived it, one of the best predictors of behavior change is having a partner. Like, what are the people in your world doing? So if you are trying to change a behavior, whatever it is, having an accountability partner is a really powerful way to do that. But yeah, I've lost 65 pounds by following two rules. Um, over a protein goal and under a calorie goal every day for, whatever it is now, 14 months. I'm just maintaining now, but for 14 months, just the same way you do it with money, right? Couple of simple goals, a lot of accountability, a lot of monitoring, and just doing the simple things right. Nothing fancy, no medicine, no shots, no pills, just a lot of protein drinks and chicken and yeah, and
Well,
that's it.
don't forget the Snickers bar, because I understand you have a Snickers bar every day, regardless,
I
right?
have I get up in the morning, I track every calorie. I get up in the morning and the first thing I put in, sometimes it's a Reese's cup, usually it's a Snickers bar, but yeah, Snickers bar every day because that's happening. Whatever else happens, that's happening. And it's a good
Yeah.
reminder to reward yourself and make the journey worth it.
Well, it seems like your 2025, notion of the year of meaningful living is
Mm,
really living itself out for you. So I'm happy for you. Look great and keep
thank
up
you.
the great work. So we've talked a lot about joy on the show so far, Daniel. And as you know, we ask each of our guests the same final question because our listeners are hanging on to what this is going to be for you because everybody is different. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
So I'm gonna take a little bit of privilege here and I'm gonna go with this week because it was really yesterday. But
Sure.
I I love watches. I'm actually not wearing the watch right this second, but I love watches. My buddy got me into watches. He has cancer, and is also selling his business. So he is experiencing, um, at the same time, the highs and lows of human existence. He's
Hmm.
securing generational wealth for his family and fighting for his life. And so he and I and my son went down to Tampa, and we all got watches that day and created a day full of memories and the stuff that I'll never forget. So that brought me a ton of joy. Just three dudes looking for watches, spending time together, talking about life and the highs and lows brought me a ton of joy this week.
I'm getting chills. It really filled up that experience bucket, it sounds
Yeah.
like. So fantastic. Well, listen, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes and information about the book, right? In terms of The Soul of Wealth, 50 Reflections on Money and Meaning. We're going to have links there too. But if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, what's the easiest and the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing joy into the conversation. Thank you for having me. I'm Daniel Crosby, PhD on LinkedIn, at Daniel Crosby on Twitter, and I have my own podcast, Standard Deviations, where we talk about living meaningfully.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Daniel. It's been a joy having you on, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Daniel, thank you for joining us today and sharing your powerful insights into the true soul of wealth. Your wisdom on aligning money with meaning and mastering our financial mindset will no doubt inspire our listeners to rethink not just how they invest, but how they live. We're grateful for the practical steps and deep reflections you offered, and I know today's conversation will leave a lasting impact on so many financial journeys. Dr. Daniel Crosby and everything he is up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find him can be found in the show notes.
The opinions voiced in the Midland Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Guests on the Midland Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.